The night before my Yale School of Medicine interview, my sister Waverly Greer poured Clorox down the front of my only blazer and told me I should stop pretending I belonged there. My name is Tamsin Greer, I was 29, and that blazer was not just interview clothes. It had been given to me by Rosa Santos after her 9-year-old daughter Mira died, because Mira wanted me to wear something strong when I walked into medical school. My mother called it just a jacket. My father told me not to make things worse for my sister. So I wore the ruined blazer to Yale anyway, with a 14-inch bleach stain across my chest, and sat across from the dean of admissions. But when I said Mira's name, he opened a drawer, pulled out a folder I had never seen, and asked me one question that would destroy my sister's entire future. "Are you the Tamsin Greer Mira wrote about?" Chapter 1. The blazer they ruined the night before my Yale School of Medicine interview. My sister Waverly Greer poured Clorox down the front of the only blazer I had planned to wear. Not splashed. Not spilled. Poured. I was standing in the laundry room of my parents' house in Wellesley, Massachusetts, with the navy blazer laid across the ironing board, trying to steam out a crease from the left sleeve. It was almost 10 at night. My folder was already packed upstairs with my recommendation letters, my clinical hours summary, and the personal statement I had rewritten so many times I could feel the sentences behind my eyes. The blazer was not expensive. It was not designer. It was not the kind of thing my mother would have chosen for a Yale interview. But it mattered more than anything hanging in her cedar closet, because Rosa Santos had given it to me after her daughter Mira's funeral. Rosa had pressed the garment bag into my hands outside a church in Brighton, her fingers still cold from holding the program with Mira's picture on the front. She told me Mira wanted me to wear something with strength in it when I interviewed for medical school. I did not know how to answer her then. I only held the blazer against my chest and promised I would take care of it, so when Waverly ruined it, she did not ruin a jacket. She put bleach on the last thing a 9-year-old girl had tried to send with me into the future. The dinner before it happened should have warned me. My mother, Celeste Greer, had invited me home because she said the family should be together before my big day. Celeste was 56, polished in the way Boston charity women learn to be polished. All pearl earrings and soft cardigan and sentences that sounded kind until you listened closely. She spent most of dinner asking Waverly about Yale. How was anatomy lab? How was the white coat ceremony? Had her reflective seminar gone well? Were the other students intimidated? Waverly sat across from me like she had already won something I had not known we were competing for. She was 26, 3 years younger than me, and already in her first year at Yale School of Medicine. My parents said her name like it belonged on stationery. My father, Harlan Greer, mostly poured wine. At 59, he had built a career as a managing director at an old asset management firm in Boston, and he had also built a life around not choosing sides until the side with more power had already chosen for him. When I mentioned that my interview was at Sterling Hall the next morning, my mother did not smile. "Yale is not for everyone, Tamsin," she said, cutting a piece of salmon into pieces too small to need cutting. Waverly set down her fork. "You know I'm already there." You know what that means. At the time, I thought she was trying to make me feel small. That was familiar. But there was something else under her voice, something tight and bright and afraid. I would not understand it until the next morning, sitting across from a dean who already had Mira's name in a folder. After dinner, I went to the laundry room to steam the blazer. I wanted the sleeve smooth. I wanted one thing about the next day to look untouched. I turned away for maybe 8 seconds to fill the steamer cup at the sink. When I turned back, Waverly was standing beside the ironing board with a white bottle of Clorox in her hand. The cap was off. For one strange second, neither of us moved, then she tilted the bottle. The bleach ran in a bright, ugly stream down the front of the navy wool, eating the color as it spread. The stain opened like a wound, orange at the center, yellow around the edges. Almost 14 inches from lapel to pocket, Waverly's face did not change. "You shouldn't walk into Yale pretending you belong there," she said. My body went cold before I felt angry. Not because of the interview. Not even because of Yale. Because I could still see Rose's hands on that garment bag. I could still hear her telling me Mira wanted me to have strength. My mother appeared in the doorway, close enough to see everything. She looked at the blazer, then at Waverly, then at me. "Stop making this dramatic. It's a jacket." My father came in behind her, his wine glass still in his hand. "Your sister is under enough pressure. Don't make this worse for her." That was the Greer family in one room. Waverly with the weapon. Celeste with the excuse. Harlan with the surrender. There was a version of me, maybe 10 years younger, who would have cried in front of them. There was a version of me who would have tried to explain that this was not about fabric, that this was cruel, that this was deliberate, that families were not supposed to destroy each other the night before something important. But I had spent years being called dramatic every time I told the truth. I had learned that if I raised my voice, my mother would make the volume the crime. So I did not yell. I did not slap Waverly. I did not throw the bottle. I took out my phone. I photographed the blazer on the ironing board, the wet bleach still spreading. I photographed the Clorox bottle on the counter, Waverly's hand still near it before she stepped back. I photographed the laundry room, the steamer, the stain, the timestamp at the top of the screen. Then I emailed the photos to myself. After that, I opened the Notes app and typed exactly what my mother had said. Stop making this dramatic, it's a jacket. Then what my father had said. Your sister is under enough pressure. Waverly stared at me like she had expected screaming, and did not know what to do with silence. My mother said my name in that warning tone she had used since I was a child. I picked up the blazer with both hands and carried it upstairs. My old bedroom was not really my room anymore. Half of it had become my mother's overflow office, stacked with charity binders and donor luncheon folders. Even after I moved out, Celeste had found a way to take up space there. I laid the blazer across a towel. I blotted what I could. I rinsed the damaged area carefully, just enough to cut the sharp chemical smell. I pressed it between towels and hung it by the window, where the February air leaked through the frame. The stain did not fade. The navy was gone where the bleach had touched it. But by morning it was dry, and it no longer smelled like something that would burn my throat. I could have told myself not to wear it. I could have imagined every interviewer looking at the stain before they looked at me. But the interview was early. The stores were closed. My other formal clothes were back in Somerville. I had no time to borrow anything that fit, and beneath all those practical reasons was the only reason that mattered. Rosa had given me that blazer, because Mira believed I belonged in a room like Yale. I was not going to let my family decide it had become shame. Before dawn, I left the house without saying goodbye. The roads were dark from Wellesley toward Connecticut. By the time I passed near Wallingford, the sky had started to pale. I pulled into a gas station, parked beside a snowbank crusted gray from the road, and cried for exactly 30 seconds. I watched the timer on my phone because I did not trust myself not to disappear into it. Then I wiped my face, checked the folder on the passenger seat, touched the damaged lapel, and drove the rest of the way to New Haven. At Sterling Hall of Medicine, the admissions assistant smiled at me the way kind people smile when they notice something painful and choose not to make it worse. She checked my name and told me I had 3 interviews. Dr. Phoebe Linwood first, Dr. Elias Venn second, Dr. Reed Larkin third. Then she looked back at her screen. Dr. Venn specifically requested your second slot, she said. I did not know what that meant. By the time I stepped into Dr. Elias Venn's office, my hands were steady. He was 61, silver-haired, careful-eyed, the kind of man who made silence feel deliberate instead of empty. He glanced at the bleach stain, then at my file, then at my last name. Greer. Something flickered across his face. He asked me to tell him about a patient who had changed the way I understood medicine. I had practiced a polished answer. I had planned to talk about systems, barriers, communication, continuity of care. Instead, I thought of a small hand in mine and a hospital room with an east-facing window. I said her name, Mira Santos. Dr. Venn stopped moving. For a moment, the room went completely still. Then he opened the second drawer of his desk and took out a thin folder I had never seen before. He looked at me, not at the stain, not at the file, not at my last name this time, but at me. Are you the Tamsin Greer Mira wrote about? That was when I understood Yale had known my name before I ever walked into the room. Chapter 2. The girl who wrote first. Dr. Venn did not hand me the folder right away. He kept one palm resting on top of it, as if the paper inside was something alive enough to startle. For a moment, all I could hear was the faint hum of the old building and the blood moving in my ears. I had driven to New Haven expecting to explain myself to Yale. I had expected to defend my grades, my delayed application, my non-traditional path, my hours on a pediatric oncology floor that did not look impressive to people who only respected titles. I had not expected a dean to open a drawer and ask whether I was the woman a dead child had written about. How do you know, Mira? I asked. His eyes softened, but his voice stayed careful. Dr. Astrid Keller sent me a letter late last year. She said I should keep it with your name, just in case your application ever came across my desk. Dr. Astrid Keller, Boston Children's, Pediatric Hematology. The doctor who had stood at the end of Mira's bed with her arms folded and her face steady, even on days when everyone else in the room was breaking. I looked down at the ruined lapel of my blazer. The orange bleach stain cut across the navy like a warning. To understand why that folder mattered, you have to understand what my family had spent years teaching me not to believe. That I could be chosen. That someone could see me clearly. That my work could exist without being handed to Waverly. I grew up in a 5-bedroom colonial in Wellesley, Massachusetts, where the hedges were trimmed before fundraisers, and my mother's friends said things like impact and stewardship, while drinking white wine in our dining room. From the outside, Celeste Greer looked like the kind of mother people trusted. She sat on charity committees, chaired donor luncheons, and spoke beautifully about children's futures, access to care, and compassion. Inside the house, compassion had rules. It was public, polished, and usually reserved for people who made my mother look good. I was the older daughter, born responsible. That was the word Celeste used for me when I got straight A's, when I drove Waverly to practice, when I remembered Harlan's dry cleaning, when I learned to cook because my mother had a board dinner and my father would forget to feed us. Waverly was 3 years younger, and she was never responsible. She was gifted, memorable, sensitive, special. When I was 16, I told my parents I wanted to become a doctor. We were in the kitchen, and I remember the way Celeste closed the dishwasher like she was ending the conversation before it began. Medicine is a very long road, Tamsin. Harlan looked up from his laptop and gave me the kind of smile he used before saying something that sounded gentle, but landed like a locked door. You've always been good in support roles, that matters too. 2 weeks later, I heard Celeste tell one of her Boston charity friends that Waverly had the temperament for pediatrics. Waverly was 13 then. She still cried if she had to do her own laundry. I went to Tufts in 2014 anyway. I studied biology, worked weekends, took Spanish medical interpretation courses, and graduated in 2018 without the family celebration Waverly would have gotten for passing an intro chemistry exam. From 2018 to 2021, I built my path slowly. Clinical volunteering, night shifts, application workshops I paid for myself, jobs that left my feet aching. I was not the kind of applicant who floated into medicine on legacy donations and curated internships. In July 2021, I became a bilingual patient navigator with a pediatric oncology program connected to Dana-Farber and Boston Children's Hospital. There was no white coat, no ceremony, no photo for Celeste to send to her donor circle. My job was explaining chemo schedules, insurance forms, transportation vouchers, consent paperwork, family conferences, pharmacy instructions. I sat with parents when the words came too fast. I found interpreters when the system forgot language was not a luxury. I learned that medicine was not only the moment someone named the disease. Sometimes medicine was the person who stayed after the doctor left and helped a mother understand what had just happened. I met Mira Santos in August 2022. She was 7 years old, born late in December, small for her age, with enormous Vitsk eyes and a purple blanket she refused to let anyone wash unless Rosa stood beside the machine. Mira had B-cell acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Her mother, Rosa Santos, had come to Massachusetts from Honduras in 2012 and worked as a housekeeping supervisor at a hotel in Cambridge. Mira's father, Mateo, had been killed on I-93 in 2019 by a drunk driver. Rosa had been raising Mira alone ever since. The first time I entered Mira's room, Rosa was sitting rigidly beside the bed, trying to follow a conversation about induction therapy. Her English was good for daily life, but oncology had its own language, and it was cruel how quickly people expected terrified parents to become fluent in it. Mira heard someone say they might have to put her under for a procedure, and her eyes filled. "Does that mean forever?" she whispered. Rosa looked at me like she had just been handed a cliff. I switched to Spanish for Rosa, slowing everything down, then crouched beside Mira's bed. "No, sweetheart. Tired is not gone, tired is still here." Mira studied my face for a long second. Then she slipped her hand out from under the blanket and held mine. After that, I kept coming back. I read Charlotte's Web to her on days when nausea made cartoons too loud. She loved the idea that Charlotte could write something so true that everyone had to stop and look. Once, after I finished a chapter, Mira tapped the page with one finger and said, "Maybe someone will write something nice about me one day." I told her, "They should write a whole book." She smiled, but she was already tired. Her room had an east-facing window. On one morning after 2 days when she could barely eat, the sunrise came in pale gold across her blanket. Mira turned her head toward it and whispered, "The sun came up again. I made it. I'm still here." I wrote that line down later because I did not want the world to lose it. Dr. Astrid Keller noticed more than people thought she did. Ingrid Sandberg, the senior pediatric oncology social worker, noticed too. So did Kelsey Rourke, Mira's primary nurse. There were notes, not sentimental ones, professional ones. Translation support, family coping, bedside presence, hospice preparation. By early 2025, I had 3,460 logged patient navigation hours. Of those, 1,240 were tied directly to Mira and Rosa, with 42 redacted support notes, documenting the work my family had always called invisible. In April 2023, before Mira relapsed, I wrote a draft of my medical school personal statement about her. I wrote about the east-facing window, about Charlotte's Web, about translating fear into something a mother and child could hold. I saved it in an old pre-med folder on the family Google Drive Celeste had set up when I was in high school. I thought my subfolder was private. I did not know my mother still had admin access. In June 2024, Mira relapsed. By September, hospice had begun. During those last weeks, she slept more, but when she was awake, she was still Mira. Sharp, gentle, worried more about Rosa than herself. One afternoon, she asked Rosa to write a letter for her in pencil because her hand shook too much. It was addressed to the people who pick who gets to be a doctor. Mira asked them to choose me. She said I held her hand, read Charlotte's Web, translated for her mother, and already knew how to be a doctor in the ways that mattered. She died in November 2024. After the funeral, Rosa gave me the navy blazer and a garment bag. She told me Mira wanted me to wear something strong when I went to medical school interviews. What I did not know then was that Mira had also drawn a picture for me. In it, I was sitting beside her bed in scrubs, holding her hand. On the back she had written, "For when you graduate." Mira, age 9, Rosa gave that drawing to Celeste at a Boston Children's donor luncheon because she recognized my mother from a family photo I had once shown her. Celeste promised she would deliver it. I never received it. Back in Dr. Ven's office, he opened the folder and read Mira's letter aloud. I recognized Rosa's careful handwriting, but the words were Mira's. The rhythm was hers. The brave little corrections. The way she said please like she was asking for a glass of water, not leaving behind evidence of a life. By the end, I could not look at him. I stared at my hands instead, at the fingers that had once held hers. Dr. Venn closed the folder gently. "I need to be careful here," he said. "I cannot discuss another applicant's file with you." But there is a serious overlap concern involving a prior application. After this interview, I am obligated to refer the matter to the Committee on Honor and Professionalism. He did not say Waverly's name. He did not have to. After the interview, I walked into the Yale courtyard and sat on a cold stone bench with my folder in my lap. Students crossed in front of me, laughing softly, carrying coffee, wearing coats that had not been marked by someone else's fear. I touched the bleach stain on my blazer. For the first time, I understood that Waverly had not ruined it because she was angry. She had ruined it because she was afraid Mira would speak first. Chapter 3. The essay that wasn't Hersey did not drive back to Wellesley after the interview. My mother called twice before I reached the Massachusetts line, and both times I let it ring. By the time I parked outside my apartment near Somerville, the sky had gone the flat winter gray that made every building look tired. I sat in the car for a minute with my hands still on the wheel, the folder from Yale on the passenger seat, and the ruined blazer pulling against my shoulders like it had become heavier on the ride home. Celeste had taught me to respond quickly, to smooth things over, to come back to the family version of the story before I had time to trust my own. That day I did the opposite. I went upstairs, locked my apartment door, and opened my laptop before I even took off my shoes. The old Greer family Google Drive was still bookmarked in my browser. Celeste had created it when I was in high school, back when she wanted every college essay, scholarship form, transcript request, and recommendation deadline in one place. She called it organization. I had called it normal because I did not know yet that control often dresses itself up as help. Inside the drive was a folder labeled pre-med materials. I had not thought about the permissions in years. I had moved out, I paid my own rent, I handled my own applications. I assumed the subfolder was mine because my name was on it. I opened the file I already knew would be there. Personal Statement Draft, April 2023. My fingers hovered above the keyboard before I clicked Version History. There I was, over and over again, editing late at night after hospital shifts. April 3rd, April 10th, April 22nd. Paragraphs moving, sentences tightening. Mira's east-facing window appearing in one draft, then Charlotte's Web, then the morning she whispered that the sun came up again, then I saw it. May 18, 2023, 1:46 a.m. Celeste Greer viewed this file. She had not edited it. She had not commented. She had not left a visible mark. She had only opened the door. For a long time I stared at that line on the screen. I thought about my mother downstairs in the dark house in Wellesley, opening my draft while everyone else slept. I thought about her reading Mira's name, Rose's fear, the sunrise, the lines I had written because a little girl deserved to be remembered accurately. My phone buzzed again, Mum. I turned it face down. Later, I learned what Waverly had done with those details. During her Yale application cycle in 2023 and early 2024, she wrote about a pediatric oncology patient with an east-facing window. She wrote about a mother who needed Spanish interpretation. She wrote about Charlotte's Web, about presence through suffering, about learning that medicine was not only treatment but witness. In August 2024, when Waverly started at Yale, she did not leave the lie inside her application file. She carried it into rooms. In a reflective seminar, she told a version of Mira's story as if it belonged to her. Naomi Pierce, one of her classmates, heard it and believed her. Of course she did. The details were too specific to sound invented. That was the most obscene part. Waverly did not steal a vague idea. She stole the texture of a child's life, and Celeste used it too. By then, my mother was telling people in Boston donor circles that her younger daughter had served pediatric oncology families before Yale. She said Waverly understood suffering. She said Waverly had always been drawn to children. Lenora Whitcomb, the chair of one of Celeste's charity boards, praised her for raising a future physician with such compassion. My mother had turned Waverly into a trophy, and Mira into the polish. The first person I called was Ingrid Sandberg. She answered on the third ring, her voice brisk and kind in the way hospital people sound when they are already carrying 6 emergencies. Tamsin, are you all right? No, I said, but I need to ask you something carefully. I asked whether Waverly had ever shadowed on the pediatric oncology floor. I asked whether her name appeared anywhere near Mira Santos. Ingrid went quiet. I can't send you records directly, she said, and I won't. You know that, I know. If Yale sends a formal request and if Rosa consents to anything connected to Mira, I can provide professional verification. Dates, role, general access, redacted support references, nothing improper. Her answer steadied me more than sympathy would have. The truth could still move, but it had to move cleanly. Then I called Rosa. She picked up from the break room at the Cambridge Hotel. I could hear a vending machine humming behind her. Mi niña, she said softly. She still called me that sometimes, even though I was 29. I asked her about the drawing. At first, she did not understand. The one Mira made for me, I said, the one that said for when you graduate. There was a pause so long I stood up without meaning to. You got it, yes? Rosa asked. My chest tightened. No, her breathing changed. I gave it to your mother. The room seemed to tilt. Rosa told me she had seen Celeste at a Boston Children's donor luncheon after Mira died. She recognized her from a family photo I had once shown her. Rosa had believed that a mother would understand what it meant to deliver a child's last gift. Celeste had taken the envelope with both hands and promised she would give it to me that night. I thought you had it, Rosa whispered. I never did. That was the last thing Mira tried to give you. I closed my eyes. There are kinds of theft that do not look violent until you understand what was taken. Within days, Yale contacted the hospital through the proper channels. Dr. Reed Larkin's office coordinated with Maribel Cruz, a 35-year-old compliance officer who made it very clear that no raw medical records would be sent anywhere. Rosa signed consent for limited verification connected to Mira. The hospital would provide only what was appropriate: roles, dates, logged hours, badge access. Redacted support references if necessary. For the first time since the bleach hit the blazer, I felt something like relief. Not because the process would be easy, but because it would not depend on my family admitting anything. Still, I needed to know whether my father had known. I called Harlan late on a Thursday. He answered from his office, his voice low. Tamsin, did Mom read my statement before Waverly applied to Yale? Silence. Dad, I don't know exactly what you think happened. That was how Harlan lied. Not with invention, but with fog. 15 minutes later, Celeste called. I almost did not answer. Then I did. Her voice was sweet enough to warn me. Whatever you think happened, do not turn your sister's life into collateral damage. Is that what Mira is to you? Damage? Tamsin, don't be cruel. I laughed once. Quietly, because the word cruel sounded strange coming from her. You still haven't asked what happened, you're only asking how to stop it. She hung up first. In Wellesley, I later learned, Celeste told Harlan they had to present a united front. She said Waverly had worked too hard to be ruined by my bitterness. She said families survived by not handing outsiders a knife. But guilt has a way of finding the drawer you refuse to open. Harlan started looking through his old messages from May 2023. He found them. Celeste had texted him minutes after opening my draft. Tamsin's Mira section is stronger than anything Waverly has. Then another, she already had her chance to be noble. Then, Waverly needs Yale. And finally, we can adapt the patient details. No one will know. Harlan had not stopped her. His replies were weak little fences built after the horses were gone. Celeste, don't. That's Tamsin's work. We should think about this. He had known enough to object and not enough to act. He asked me to meet him at a small cafe in Cambridge on a rainy afternoon in March. He looked older than he had at dinner, his collar slightly crooked, his hands wrapped around a paper cup he had not drunk from. I brought what I have, he said. He airdropped 37 screenshots to my phone, then a voice memo. In it, his voice shook as he said he had not written the lie, but he had protected it by staying quiet. At the table, he looked at me like he wanted me to rescue him from what he had just confessed. I'm sorry, he said. I looked at my father, at the man who had watched my mother shrink me for years and called it peace. I'm glad you told the truth. His face softened too quickly, so I finished before he could mistake that for forgiveness. Then don't ask me to make your silence easier now. Outside, rain streaked the cafe window. On my phone, 37 screenshots waited in a neat row, each one a piece of the same answer. This had never been a misunderstanding. My mother had designed the lie from the beginning. Chapter 4. The drawing in the second door 2 days after my father gave me the screenshots. Celeste invited me back to Wellesley to talk like a family. That was the phrase she used. Like a family, not to tell the truth. Not to apologize. Not even to ask what Yale had found. She wanted a room with closed doors, familiar furniture, and the old rules, where she could make my pain sound like disobedience, and Waverly's fraud sound like pressure. I went anyway. But I did not go back as the daughter who used to walk into that house hoping someone would finally choose her. I went with the Google Drive version history saved in 3 places, 37 screenshots from Harlan, his voice memo, the time-stamped photos of my ruined blazer, confirmation that Rosa had signed consent for limited hospital verification, and an email from Yale stating that the Committee on Honor and Professionalism had opened a formal review. I parked in front of the house where I had grown up and sat there for a moment with both hands on the steering wheel. The hedges were trimmed. The porch light was on. The white columns looked freshly painted. From the street, the Greer house still looked like the kind of home where people wrote thank you notes and donated to children's hospitals. Inside, my mother was waiting in cream trousers and a silk blouse, dressed less like a woman whose daughter's future was under review, and more like she was about to chair a board meeting. Waverly sat at the kitchen island, her eyes red, her hair pulled into a careless knot. She looked younger than 26 but not sorry. Frightened, yes. Cornered, yes. Sorry would have required looking at me, and she did not. Harlan stood near the back windows with his arms folded, separated from them by 10 feet of polished hardwood and years of cowardice. Celeste opened her arms slightly, as if she expected me to step into them. I did not. This can still be handled privately, she said. It stopped being private when Mira's name was used to get Waverly into Yale. Waverly flinched at Mira's name and Celeste's mouth tightened. Do not use that child as a weapon. For 1 second I almost laughed. Celeste had a gift for accusing other people of the exact thing she had already done. That child had a name, I said, and she had a mother, and she was not yours to repurpose. Celeste placed one hand on the marble counter. We have spoken to Stanton Hargrove. Of course they had. Stanton Hargrove had been my parents' attorney for years, the kind of man who sent polite letters with sharp edges. He advised Waverly to cooperate, Celeste said, but not to admit intent before any formal finding. Which is reasonable. It's damage control, I said. It is protecting your sister. No, it is protecting the lie. Harlan looked down. I turned toward Celeste. Where is Mira's drawing? For the first time since I walked in, my mother's face changed. I don't know what you mean. Rosa gave you a drawing at the Boston Children's Donor Luncheon after Mira died. She recognized you from a family photo. You promised to give it to me. Celeste blinked once, slowly. I may have misplaced something. It was a difficult season. Waverly whispered. Mom. Celeste shot her a look so quick and cold that Waverly went silent, and then I remembered the second drawer. I was 10 the first time I opened it. I had been looking for stockings for a school concert. Because Celeste was late coming home from a luncheon, she found me with my hand inside that drawer and closed it so hard my fingers almost caught. My drawer is private, Tamsin. That is how this house works. I had never opened it again, until that day. I walked past my mother and headed for the stairs. Tamsin, Celeste snapped. I kept walking. Do not make a scene in my house. I stopped at the bottom step and looked back. Your house is already the scene. She followed me up, her heels striking the stairs behind me. Harlan did not stop me. That was new. Waverly stayed below, one hand over her mouth, watching, from the kitchen like she was seeing the structure of her life crack in real time. Celeste's bedroom smelled like lavender, linen spray, and expensive perfume. Everything was in its place. The folded throw at the foot of the bed, the silver frame on the dresser, the charity folders stacked beside her reading chair. I went straight to the dresser, second drawer. Celeste stood in the doorway. You have no right. I opened it. Silk scarves, gloves, a small velvet pouch, stationery, a flat cream envelope tucked beneath a folded scarf printed with blue birds. I did not touch it at first. I took out my phone and photographed the drawer exactly as it was, the scarf, the envelope, the position, the timestamp. Then I lifted the envelope with both hands. My name was not on it, but I knew before I opened it. Inside was Mira's drawing. The paper was slightly bent at one corner. Pencil lines, soft and careful, a hospital bed, a small girl under a blanket, a woman in scrubs sitting beside her holding her hand. Me, seen through Mira's eyes, gentler than I had ever seen myself. On the back in uneven pencil were the words. For when you graduate, Mira, age 9. The room blurred. Celeste said nothing. That silence told me more than any confession could have. I carried the drawing downstairs and placed it on the dining table. The same table where Celeste had served salmon and told me Yale was not for everyone. Waverly stared at the paper and then looked away. Harlan's shoulders dropped like something inside him had finally broken. I looked at my mother. You didn't just take my words. You took the last thing a dying child tried to give me. Celeste pressed her lips together. I meant to give it to you. It was in your private drawer. I forgot. No, you stored it. Her face hardened. You have always needed to make yourself the injured party. There it was. The old spell. The old room. The old version of me who might have wondered if she was right, but the drawing was on the table now. So were the photographs in my phone. So were the screenshots. So was the review. I called Rosa from my car after I left. She answered quietly, like she already knew. I found it, I said. For a few seconds she only breathed, then she whispered, "She kept it?" "Yes." Rosa began to cry, but not loudly. That made it worse. "She trusted your mother because she thought mothers understood last gifts." I sat in the driver's seat outside the Wellesley house and watched Celeste appear in the front window with her phone pressed to her ear. She was not looking at me. She was pacing. A few minutes later, I learned why. Lenora Whitcomb had texted her asking whether it was true Yale was reviewing Waverly's application. Celeste did not ask who had hurt Mira's memory. She did not ask how Rosa felt. She did not ask what her younger daughter had admitted or what her older daughter had lost. She asked, "Who told Lenora?" That was my mother's real fear. Not that she had done something unforgivable. That someone important might know. Over the next week, the review took shape. Yale's Committee on Honor and Professionalism scheduled a fact-finding meeting. Dr. Elias Venn would attend as dean. Dr. Phoebe Linwood would provide her interview notes. Dr. Reed Larkin would handle the timeline comparison and document chain. Maribel Cruz sent redacted hospital verification through proper channels. Ingrid Sandberg and Kelsey Rourke submitted professional statements. Rosa agreed to appear by video. Naomi Pierce, Waverly's classmate, was contacted because she had heard the east-facing window story in seminar. Stanton Hargrove was allowed to sit with Waverly as an advisor, but the committee made clear that this was an academic review, not a family negotiation Celeste could control. That detail mattered to me. The night before the review, Waverly called. I almost ignored it. Then I answered. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "You don't know what Mom put on me," she said finally. Her voice sounded small, but not innocent. "I know exactly what she put on you. But you still submitted the essay." Waverly exhaled shakily. "I was 24, I was scared, everyone expected me to be extraordinary." "Mira was not your pressure," I said. "She was a child." She had no answer. The next morning, I stood outside the conference room at Yale with the damaged blazer on my shoulders. The bleach stain was still there, impossible to miss. In my folder was a copy of Mira's drawing, the photographs from Celeste's drawer, the screenshots, the timeline, and the truth my family had spent years teaching me to soften. I was not walking in to destroy my sister. I was walking in to say Mira's name correctly. Chapter 5. The letter that exposed them. The conference room was quieter than I expected. No raised voices, no dramatic entrance. Just a long table, a pitcher of water, and folders arranged in front of people who understood that paperwork could change a life more completely than shouting ever could. Dr. Elias Venn sat at the center. Dr. Phoebe Linwood was to his left, with her interview notes neatly stacked beside her. Dr. Reed Larkin sat to his right, a laptop open in front of him. Waverly sat across from me with Stanton Hargrove beside her. He was there as an advisor only, and everyone in the room understood that. Celeste sat perfectly upright, her face controlled, her hands folded like she was waiting for a charity board vote. Harlan looked smaller than I remembered. On the screen at the end of the room was Rosa Santos, calling from her apartment in Brighton. She had pulled her hair back, and behind her I could see a small framed photo of Mira on a shelf. I sat down in the blazer Waverly had ruined. The bleach stain was impossible to miss. Celeste looked at it once, then looked away as if the fabric itself had become rude. Dr. Venn opened the meeting by explaining that this was a professionalism review, not a trial. The committee would ask questions, review documents, and issue written findings. No one was there to perform. That alone took something away from my mother. Dr. Reed Larkin began with the timeline. He showed that my personal statement draft had been created in April 2023. He showed the version history, the late-night edits after hospital shifts, the paragraph about Mira's east-facing window, Charlotte's Web, Rosa needing Spanish interpretation, and the morning Mira said the sun came up again. Then he showed the access log. Celeste Greer viewed this file on May 18, 2023 at 1:46 a.m. My mother did not move, Dr. Larkin continued. Waverly's Yale application, submitted in the 2023-2024 cycle, contained substantially overlapping details, not general themes, not similar values, details, an east-facing hospital window, a child who had not eaten, a Spanish-speaking mother, Charlotte's Web in a chemo room. Waverly kept her eyes on the table. Then Dr. Linwood spoke about my clinical work. She did not make it sentimental. That almost made it stronger. Tamsin Greer has 3,460 logged patient navigation hours. Of those, 1,240 are tied directly to support involving Mira and Rosa Santos. There are 42 redacted support notes referencing translation, family coping, bedside support, and hospice preparation. She looked at Waverly then. These are not decorative experiences. They are documented work. Maribel Cruz's verification was entered next. Everything had come through proper request, consent, and redaction. No raw medical records, no private information beyond what was necessary. Rosa had consented. The hospital had verified access and roles. Waverly had 4 badge entries to the pediatric oncology area. Total time, 5 hours and 17 minutes. No record of entering Mira's room. No record of translation, family conference, bedside support, or hospice involvement. Stanton Hargrove leaned toward Waverly and whispered something, but he did not speak to the committee. Then came Naomi Pierce's written statement. Naomi had heard Waverly tell the story in a Yale reflective seminar as if it belonged to her. She remembered the east-facing window because she had thought it was beautiful. She remembered Waverly saying the experience taught her presence through suffering. I watched Waverly's face when that line was read aloud. She looked humiliated, but not in the way people look when they regret harm. She looked like someone whose costume had been removed in public. Then Dr. Venn turned to the screen. "Mrs. Santos, are you comfortable speaking now?" Rosa nodded. Her voice was soft, but it carried through the room. Tamsin was the one who sat with Mira. Tamsin translated for me when I was scared and too tired to understand. Tamsin read Charlotte's Web when Mira could not sleep. Tamsin held her hand. She swallowed. My daughter did not know Waverly. She never said that name to me. Waverly's shoulders tightened. Rosa looked straight into the camera. My daughter was not an application strategy. No one spoke for several seconds. I opened my folder and placed Mira's drawing on the table. The original. Beside it the photographs I had taken of it inside Celeste's second drawer. Silk scarf, cream envelope. Timestamp. Dr. Venn turned the drawing over and read the back. For when you graduate. Mira, age 9. My mother finally spoke. I intended to give that to Tamsin. Dr. Venn looked at her. Why was it kept in your private drawer for several months? Celeste opened her mouth, but nothing useful came out. Harlan's screenshots came last. 37 of them. My mother's texts after she read my draft. Tamsin's Mira section is stronger than anything Waverly has. Waverly needs Yale. We can adapt the patient details. No one will know. Then my father's voice memo. He admitted he had known enough to object and had not done enough to stop it. He did not defend himself. That was the only decent thing he did in that room. The committee asked Waverly whether she had ever met Mira Santos. Waverly's voice was thin. I spent time on the unit. Dr. Larkin looked at the verification. There is no record that you entered Mira Santos's room. Waverly blinked fast. I thought the story represented the kind of doctor I wanted to become. I heard myself answer before I planned to. You don't become that kind of doctor by stealing the child who taught someone else how to stay. Celeste turned on me then, because she could not help herself. This is what she does. Tamsin has always resented her sister. For the first time that morning, I looked directly at my mother. This is not about who you loved more. This is about whether a medical school can trust someone who used a dead child's story as a credential. Dr. Venn ended the meeting shortly after that. He said the committee would issue written findings. He did not announce a decision in the room. He did not need to. The lie had already collapsed. A little less than 2 weeks later, the email came. Yale School of Medicine offered me admission to the class beginning August 2025. The note mentioned integrity, clinical insight, and service record. I read it alone in my apartment near Somerville, standing in the kitchen with one hand over my mouth. I did not call my mother. I did not call my father. I did not call Waverly. I called Rosa. She cried first. Then she said Mira knew. Waverly's written decision came soon after. The committee found academic misrepresentation and material omission. Her dismissal from Yale School of Medicine was effective immediately, with an appeal window under school policy. She had stolen compassion to get into Yale, and lost Yale because she had none. Celeste's punishment was quieter, but it hit the part of her that had always mattered most to her. Lenora Whitcomb stopped returning calls. One charity committee asked Celeste to step down while questions circulated. Luncheon invitations disappeared. The woman who had built a public life around children's futures had used one dead child's story to protect her own daughter's lie. She texted me once. You destroyed your sister. I took a screenshot, saved it in the folder, and did not reply. Harlan moved out of the Wellesley house and rented a small apartment in Back Bay. When he called, he said he did not expect forgiveness. Good, I told him. Because I'm not there yet. That was the truth. I could leave a door unlocked without opening it all the way. In May, I went to Rosa's apartment in Brighton. She had framed Mira's drawing in a second-hand frame, and we ate soup at her small kitchen table. Afterward, she took out a sewing kit, turned my blazer inside out, and opened the lining near my heart. With white thread, she stitched one small letter into the fabric. She did not try to cover the bleach stain. That part is what they did, she said. This part is what Mira left. In August 2025, I moved to New Haven. The blazer hung by the door of my new apartment. The drawing sat on a shelf where the morning light could reach it. The stain was still visible on the outside, but inside, hidden near my heart, was Mira's initial, where no one could touch it unless I let them. I did not walk into Yale because Celeste finally believed I belonged. I did not walk in because Harlan finally told the truth or because Waverly finally lost what she had stolen. I walked in because Mira had known before all of them, and before you leave, I want to ask you something. Who was worse in the end, Waverly, who stole a dying child's story? Or Celeste, the mother who turned that lie into a plan? Was Yale right to dismiss Waverly, or was the consequence too harsh? And if you were me, would you ever forgive Harlan for telling the truth only after silence had already done the damage?